Hey guys, we're back in our analog notebook at our graphic organizer that we had for rhetorical analysis. But today we're going a little bit further. We're gonna dig a little bit deeper into those speeches that you guys worked on yesterday. But we're looking for something different. And so you hopefully already have this definition up here. And what you're defining are these three words, or what they are together. And those words are, I'll probably pronounce them wrong because you see them pronounced a lot of different ways, but logos, pathos, and ethos. And these were Greek words. And there's a guy named Aristotle that kind of developed this theory, and you'll run across him a lot as you move through your educational experience. You may have seen it a little bit in middle school, or may have seen his name in middle school. But this is just kind of a loose definition for what these are. They're basically the methods a speaker uses to get their audience to conform to their purpose. And you may, yesterday we talked about this word. We talked about purpose when we were reading those speeches. You know, John F. Kennedy had a different purpose in his inaugural address than Barbara Jordan had in her Democratic National Convention keynote, or Franklin Delano Roosevelt had in his inaugural address. So the important thing with purpose is that you remember every speaker has one. If you were speaking with no purpose, it would be very clear. Every speaker has one. That's my horrible handwriting. So if they have a purpose, what it is to get their audience to conform to that, which conform is a bigger word, but you'll probably see it a lot. If you wonder what it's like, basically, think about things like fidget spinners. Like last year, I remember at one point we saw that's a weird thing. What is that? Is that a fidget spinner? And probably a lot of us were in the same spot. Like, I don't know what that is. Where did you get it? And eventually it went from hey, one person at our school has a fidget spinner to everybody has a fidget spinner. Everyone adopted that behavior, right? Everyone wanted one of those things. When speakers are trying to get you to adopt or conform to their purpose, they want you to look at the world the way they look at the world. And that's something that's common regardless of whatever purpose they have. They want their audience to conform to it. They want them to adopt their beliefs. And so we're going to keep that in mind as we move down to this, because there are different ways that a speaker does that. So we're going to go through each of these. And what Aristotle called these were, he called them appeals, right? Basically, the speaker's appeal to people in their audience to try and get them to conform or to adopt their beliefs. So the first one we're going to look at is logos. And logos is an appeal to reason. So basically, if you heard a speaker be like, hey, listen, you're a smart person. I know that you get this. And they tell you something. They're appealing to your ability to think. That's what reason is, or logic. It's your ability to think. And some examples that you might see, if you're looking for this in speeches, is if you see an if-then statement, or if you see a speaker cite statistics, of course the economy is better. Look at unemployment is here. They expect you to understand that. Or sometimes if you see them mention historical facts, they might say something like, hey, listen, we know that we have to regulate the banks because look what happened whenever we didn't in the Great Depression, or something like that. And these would be examples of a speaker appealing to your ability to think. I'm going to lay the facts out there for you and let you understand the importance of what I'm saying. So that's logos. Another appeal that people use is ethos, which is an appeal to authority. So you see these all the time. Whenever you watch TV and you see commercials where they're like, I'm a doctor and this medicine is awesome. You know, this medicine will cure you of your diseases because I'm a doctor. Like, the reason that that's an appeal to authority is because that guy's a doctor, right? Or that woman's a doctor. Like, there's a big difference if I'm like, I'm a teacher and this medicine will cure you. People would be like, well, you're a teacher. What do you know about medicine or health, right? So what they're doing is they're appealing to you by authority. They're saying, trust this guy. He's a doctor, right? So you're going to see this pop up in a few different ways in the documents that you've been reading yesterday, because all speakers, especially when you're talking in a political way, will appeal to certain authorities in our country's history. And I think in all four documents, you're going to see something like this. Our founders believed, ... Because most Americans agree that, like, those guys that wrote up the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, even though they weren't perfect, there was a lot that they understood. And we want to learn from them, and we want to keep our country the way that they envisioned it in some ways. And so you're going to see Barbara Jordan talk about what the founders believed. You're going to see John F. Kennedy talk about what the founders believed. And that's an appeal to authority. Hey, George Washington knew what he was talking about. And so let's look what he said. You'll also see things like the Constitution says. Well, why is that authority? It's because that document has authority over all of us. That's what's established our framework of government. That's how we have our rights protected, is all through that document. So this is an appeal to authority, even though it's a document. It's not a person. It's an authoritative document, the Constitution is. Or doesn't just have to be the Founding Fathers. You may see things where people refer to people, I'm just going to write this, like Abraham Lincoln. They may quote Abraham Lincoln. Or they may quote people like Socrates. We're going to look at something like that in a second. Who's not American, but he's an authority on philosophy from the ancient world. Or maybe they'll quote Susan B. Anthony, the pioneer for women's rights. You know, like these are all people that in a political speech or writing, you may see those people quoted or referenced because they hold some authority that we want to learn from and craft our society based off of. All right, and the last one is pathos. And pathos is an appeal to emotions. And it's an appeal to your emotions as the audience. If you want an example of what this is like, basically watch any political ad whenever election seasons roll around, and that's all they do. It's because this is the one that we really feel, right? We feel it in our hearts. Whenever they say, I'm just thinking of examples from this past year, or basically anything you saw from the Republican side was like, Hillary Clinton's a liar and a cheat, and she is working in the shadows to subvert the government, right? And that's appealing to your emotions, like, oh my gosh, she's destroying our country. I can't believe it. On the flip side, if you watched a Democratic ad about Donald Trump, it would have said a lot of the similar things. He doesn't care about the country. He's working behind the scenes with other countries and blah, blah, blah. And he's rich. He doesn't get what it's like to be poor. He does whatever. He's disconnected from the common person. All of those are meant to pull on your emotions for you to think, oh, they're not like us. Oh, they don't care about this country. Oh, they're going to destroy this country. So that you're pushed to some action. Well, those political ads have a purpose. They want you to vote for their candidate. And that's why at the end, you may watch a commercial where the whole point is like ripping on Hillary Clinton. At the end, it's like, vote for Donald Trump for president 2016. Or you might watch a whole ad that's about ripping Donald Trump. And at the end, you would have seen, vote for Hillary Clinton 2016. Paid for by Hillary Clinton 2016. It's because they want you to follow their purpose. So they're appealing to your emotions. So some examples that you may see from this is anytime you see things like charged language, what that means is anytime you see people talking about they do this or they do that, or really strong adjectives, really strong descriptive words. Like, you could say, you know what, I don't think that my opponent's policies are a good plan for this country. But charged language would be like, my opponent's policies will be disastrous with grave consequences and our country will melt into the ground. You know, that sort of thing. Maybe not the melt in the ground part, but you get the idea. You also would see people use personal stories when they use pathos. So I could say, like, let's say I'm Franklin Delano Roosevelt and it's in the Great Depression. I could say something like, people are out of work and they're trying to get jobs and they can't find them and it's really hard. Or I could be like, let me introduce you to my friend. This is Molly Johnson, and she is working so hard to put food on the table for her 4 kids, but she can't get enough money from her job that pays minimum wage, and her kids are starving. And now you're starting to feel like, oh, that's what it's like. You're starting to feel like, what? You're starting to put yourself in those shoes. What would it be like if I was Molly Johnson? I couldn't feed my kids. And you feel it more than if it's just facts and statistics. Actually, that's one of the big gripes about, this is a side note, but about Herbert Hoover, is that he cited statistics during the Great Depression. He'd be like, hey, listen, most people aren't out of work. Everything's fine, you know, whatever. I mean, there's problems, but we're going to make it. Franklin Delano Roosevelt spoke to emotions. He said, I get how you feel. Herbert Hoover, yeah, I mean, it's fine. Don't worry. Don't stress. FDR's like, hey, I get that you're stressed. People are starving. We're going to make it better. And that was a big, what people wanted was what FDR did, not what Herbert Hoover did. Another thing you might see is just mentioning emotions. And when we look at this speech here in a second, we're going to see some examples of that. When a speaker talks about, we feel this way, or they felt this way, they're helping you get in touch with that, with the emotional side of your being. And so you need to watch for those words. When they talk about fear and anxiety and joy, or sadness or despair, they're mentioning those things because nothing's there by accident. All those things are there for a purpose. So we want to keep that in mind as we move into our speech. So here's one thing that I want to do. We are going to move back to that John Roberts speech. But what I want you to do on this document is we're going to highlight each of these things a different color, because as we read John Roberts, we want to watch for these things. So, and then we're going to highlight them differently. So, ethos, I want you to highlight it blue. Logos, I just realized I don't think that this, what is this? Can you guys see this? I don't even know does that even work? Oh, weird. Oh gosh, that's good video right there. I don't know what this highlighter is. I've never seen it before in my life, but it works apparently. Okay, so logos, gosh, that was weird. Logos is yellow, and pathos we're gonna do green. So that's the colors I'm using. I think that's the markers that we'll have for you guys. You can certainly do other colors if you need to, but that's what we're gonna do on mine. So blue for ethos, yellow for logos, and green for pathos. Okay, so we're gonna move kind of quickly through this, but with your little guide, we're gonna look at just a few different paragraphs and see what we can come up with. So the first spot we're gonna look is bottom of this first page, right? So you flip back to the first page, and we've got John Roberts opening to the kids at Cardigan graduation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read, and I'm going to kind of pause for a second and see if you can think about what these appeals are, what he's doing. So rain, somebody said, is like confetti from heaven. You may remember that I wrote this was confetti falling, and that should be a good example that I don't always, it's just, sometimes we don't read things correctly. And I was reading this like he was talking about confetti being like rain. those of you that really understood and probably did a much better job than I did realized it was raining and he was comparing it to confetti. Small thing, I just had to point that out. So even the heavens are celebrating this morning, joining the rest of us at this wonderful commencement ceremony. Before we go any further, graduates, you have an important task to perform because behind you are your parents and guardians. Okay, so this is where I want us to look. 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, they drove into Cardigan, dropped you off, helped you get settled, and then turned around and drove back out the gates. It was an extraordinary sacrifice for them. They drove down the trail of tears back to an emptier and lonelier house. All right, I'm going to pause right there, and I want you to think for a second. What could that be? It looks like we're talking about tears. We're using words like lonelier, emptier house, extraordinary sacrifice. So we're thinking, is it logos? Is it appealing to reason? Is it appealing to authority? Or is it appealing to emotions? And I'll be the first to say, when I was in high school, I did not always do a great job of thinking about how my parents felt about any given thing. And so what John Roberts is doing here is he's helping these 9th graders identify with your parents felt this way when they dropped you off. They rode back to their house and they may have walked in and now for the first time there's nobody there except for them. And their 14-year-old, 13-year-old, 12-year-old son is now off in the world, right? And why did they do that? So go ahead and highlight that in green if you haven't already, because he's using pathos there. Why did he do that? They did that because the decision about your education they knew was about you. So that's a big technique. He just used emotion for them to get it. He could have come right out and been like, hey, your parents, they know education's about you, and so they sent you this school. But he made sure to tie that into this is the sacrifice that your parents made. Okay, so there's a good example of pathos. Let's flip over to this page right here. So this is, the top of the page starts with now the commencement speakers. All right, so let's read this one. Now the commencement speakers will typically also wish you good luck and extend good wishes to you. I will not do that, and I'll tell you why. From time to time in the years to come, I hope you will be treated unfairly so that you will come to know the value of justice. All right, we have to be treated unfairly so that we know the value of justice. I hope that you will suffer betrayal because that will teach you the importance of loyalty. Sorry to say, but I hope you will be lonely from time to time so that you don't take friends for granted. I wish you bad luck again from time to time so that you will be conscious of the role of chance in life and understand that your success is not completely deserved and that the failure of others is not completely deserved either. All right, I want us to think about this one for a second. What's present here? What appeal is he using? Logos, ethos, or pathos? And sometimes they might be a little bit mixed up. There might be more than one there. But what I want you to do is highlight this portion. I'm going to use my weird highlighter. Because what he's doing is he's saying, hey, you want to understand value of justice? You got to be treated unfairly. You want to know the importance of loyalty? Well, suffer betrayal. You want to know why friends are important? Then you need to be lonely. And so some of the language he's using in there is like pathos inspired, but this is logos. He's saying, you get this, right? And that's why whenever we read this, we don't have to think too much to understand what he's trying to say. It's pretty clear. Okay, we're going to keep moving. I'm going to try and get through this in the next minute. So let's move to this bottom paragraph. So he says here, the Greek philosopher Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. And while just do it might be a good motto for some things, it's not a good motto when it's trying to figure out how to live your life that is before you. Okay, so he's mentioning Socrates. We kind of gave you this one earlier, and I'm using the blue marker, so it's very clear. But this is a good example of an appeal using ethos. Socrates is an expert. You know, we look at this guy as one of the brilliant thinkers of the ancient world. And so John Roberts could have said, hey, an unexamined life is not worth living. And they're just like, or he could have put it in his own words, and it might have meant something, but maybe not as much as saying, hey, Socrates, this guy that we all think was brilliant, said this, and that's why it's important. He's appealing to the authority. And we'll do one more, because just in case you think that you can only appeal to ancient authorities, he also does the same thing when he appeals to Bob Dylan. So these are the lyrics from Forever Young by Bob Dylan. That this guy that's still alive right now, a musician, has some knowledge that we can gain to understand what it means to grow up, to what it takes to be an adult, really, in this world. Okay, so those are a few examples. You're going to use some of these same strategies whenever you read in your own documents today, but make sure that you've got this filled out. Make sure that you've got a pretty decent feel for this by the end of today. And so it's going to take some conversations with your group. There are times where you may have to process some things together. There are times where you may say, oh, well, no, I don't think that's logos, I think that's ethos. Well, they might be tied up, because historical facts could also be an appeal to authority. Like if you use history as your authority, but it's also logos, because this could be, hey, use your head, use your reason. If this is what happened before, it's going to happen again. So it's not always going to be clear cut. Sometimes it'll be more than one, but practice using these today in your small groups, in your intelligence cells. All right, good luck.